Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of TEF Rewind. Sean Woodland and Tommy Marquez being joined by Kari Pearce and Justin Cotler. We were just talking here, but Kari, how are you doing first? And then we'll get into Justin because I know he's been put through the ringer here.
I'm doing great. Yeah, like you said, much better than Justin.
And
married now, life is good,
Yeah, that's congratulations on that. I think this is the first time we've actually talked to you directly since that happened. So congratulations on that. And Justin, man, I don't even know where to start with you, but thank you for being here, first of all. But you've had a rough couple weeks here.
Yeah, feels like an episode of House. But we finally, so we seemed to get to the bottom of it. So I think we're on the other end of it, and now just gotta build myself back up a little bit and whatnot. But yeah, just a few health issues, and now we're through the bump in the road, I think.
On the bright side, in every episode of House, they figure it out.
That's true.
Yep. So
that's true.
And
Yes.
we are recording this before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So if you got that coming up to where you can,
Oh yeah. We
get
can
some
eat
sustenance.
yeah, get some calories back.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do today is we're going to go through one of the most unique events and one of the most unique years of the CrossFit Games, and that is the final event of the 2020 CrossFit Games. That was the COVID year where we had to bring everybody out to Northern California and competed at a few events at the ranch. And the final event was Atalanta.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, before we jump into it, and I'll ask you both this, what was that year like competing, in Morgan Hill and then also at the ranch for you?
Go ahead, KP.
For me, it was a special year. Obviously, there was only 5 females and 5 males, so it was a lot more intimate than any other year. And just knowing that we got an event and got to test our fitness against the other top athletes, I feel like was special because a lot of other sports didn't get a season. It was canceled. Ours took a little longer to figure out exactly what the end would look like, but it was just nice knowing that we got to go and compete in person. And then obviously it was more intimate with like me and Justin and having him be right there for a lot of the events. Like I even remember the total. Normally your coach is somewhere you usually don't know where, but this event I could see him and I could go and ask for his feedback, and in the events I could just hear him cheering me on. So it was special, I think, for us, and just special for all of the athletes the 10 athletes that got to compete there.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment. I have to admit, it was really interesting. First the part A or the first part where we had to fly. We flew to Sacramento and we did the workouts. And you had your own judge that they flew in, and we were there with Danielle and Bethany, and it was just crazy. I kind of remembering that and how stressful it was with the blind leaderboard, and I'm trying to figure out points, and I screwed up the points, and I thought we were 6th instead of 5th, and oh my god, yeah, that was the worst. But then when we got to Morgan Hill and the ranch, obviously it was incredibly special, to be a part of 10 athletes, 10 coaches, everybody was really tight. And, but I also remember it being incredibly stressful because of the COVID tests every single day. You didn't want to be that person that might test positive and have to worry about, not only your athlete, but possibly getting somebody else sick or causing them to miss out on the fun, and, so I just remember it being really, it was really cool, but at the same time, it was pretty stressful the entire time until it was over, where you were like, okay, we made it, But yeah, it was a really interesting experience.
All right, well, let's. I'm going to share the old screen here. We'll just get right into it. So,
it is the site of the final event of the
there it is.
Reebok CrossFit Games.
I have spent many afternoon looking with that view after having run up that hill and just. I don't want to come down.
So, Kari, we were talking about this offline a little bit leading up to this, but now we got a commercial, I guess. This was being hinted at during the well, here it is, actually, when Dave announced it. What went through your head when they announced this event?
Well, first, there was just so much buildup. Like you said, Dave, throughout the weekend was just like, it's going to be the hardest final in CrossFit Games history. And I remember just like the athletes were just like, what is it going to be? And even like with the coaches, like speculating a little bit with Justin before, but he was pretty much like, focus on what event you have. And then I remember I was like, it's going to be heavy squat cleans, my least favorite, one of my worst movements. Justin's like, no, it's going to be running. And I was like, they've already had running in so many events. And he's like, no, it's going to be running. And then, yeah, I remember Dave going through it and being like, basically, it's a mix of Murph and then a mix of Mary. And when he announced like the workout, I remember Justin just looking at me with this smile, and I just knew exactly what he was saying. Like, let's go dominate this thing. Like, this is yours for the taking. I'm pretty sure he even quoted like, "This is yours for the taking." And like in my mind, it's just like on paper. Like I won Murph in 2016, I won Mary in 2019. So on paper, yeah, I should win, but also you have to go and do it. And all the other females are so fit. And it's like, I know this one is going to hurt, but I also knew what was at stake. And that smile of Justin's just like fired me up.
Yeah, I forgot we showed this whole thing.
Yeah, they, you know, the nature of it being a much smaller, more kind of like intimate production allowed, you know, some access to some of this behind the scenes stuff like this briefing. And I throughout the weekend, and I remember this being a big aspect of this year's games, the hints had a little bit heavier implication, right? Like Dave would throw the hints around with these workouts, and everybody was trying to figure out what this last one was. I mean, maybe Justin, this is more for you as coach. Were you trying to have a line into like, all right, what are the hints that are dropping? Maybe is there anything that I can glean from these at this time around? Because more often than not, they're a little obscure.
Yeah, I think obviously you take a look at what we had done during the weekend, obviously. And I think that there were some things left out there, obviously, that were in our wheelhouse. You know, but back at the ranch, I was like, there's no way he's not gonna include running. You know, I mean, we've had it already, but yeah, I mean, you're at the ranch, you know, I mean, and he loves that. So I figured we were gonna have that. And, you know, I figured we were probably looking at some type of, you know, some body weight movements. You know, we hadn't seen handstand push-ups. You know, we hadn't seen pull-ups to that. I think the only thing we had seen bar muscle-ups, we had seen toes to bar, but we hadn't seen pull-ups. You know, so, but when he announced it, man, you know, I think what I thought in my head was obviously, you know, the podium was still up for grabs. You know, the way that the point values shook out and the way that you could just make that move every single event because of the way the scoring was, I knew that we had a phenomenal opportunity to reach our goal of the podium. And once he announced it, it was basically just, okay, it's time to get focused and you know, we got to go out there and try to win this thing. I mean, you can't leave anything in the tank. You know, it's right there for the taking, and we got to go take it.
Yeah, I think all three, Kari, Haley, and Brooke, all were within, you know, a placement or two of that third podium spot. So it wasn't, you know, just a matter of like, hey, I gotta go out and win. It was like there's 20 points. I think there were 2 placements between Kari and Haley, and then, you know, Brooke was just a placement in between. So there was a little bit of I don't know. It wasn't as clear cut as like go out and win, because obviously you want to do that, but you kind of have to make sure that in the process a couple of the chips fell where they needed to fall.
Yeah, for sure. We needed some help. You know, we obviously needed one person in between Kari and Haley, I believed, right at the time. And
Yep.
you know, so it's basically you know, and I'll let Kari talk about it, you know, too, but it was control what you can control, which is ultimately like we know it's a really good workout for us. Go out hot, you know, because you're going to recover the most of anyone on handstand push-ups. So you can push that first run. and obviously we did, you know, and I think she showed how good she was at handstand push-ups when we came back in, but we needed to push the pace.
That's interesting about pushing the first run, because I think a lot of people, myself included, when we first saw this come out, you know, the typical, I guess, Murph thinking is that, hey, that first mile is almost irrelevant. Like, don't lose it. Don't put yourself so far behind that you can't reel people in, but just make sure you're not coming in with, like, you know, a heart rate of 160 and then hopping into that meet. But from the get-go, almost you start pushing the pace, almost like setting the tone, if you will, like, hey, I'm not going to sit back on this.
Yeah, and I actually remember like 3, 2, 1, go, and then I went out hot, and then I was like, running. And there was a point where I like looked back, so I'm like, wait, did I like false start? Are people with me? But you know, it's a 48 for an hour long workout, so everyone is gonna like kind of pace it. But I knew Justin said we did have to push the pace on that first run, especially my main competitor in that event, you know, Haley, who wanted to be on the podium. So I knew I had to go out hotter than I wanted because she's such a phenomenal runner. And yeah, like the two of us were pretty close in the first run. She beat me coming in a little bit, but then yeah, I was able to move a little faster in the handstand push-ups.
You know, and I would never have told her to do that if she wasn't so good at the middle parts. I mean, that's the thing, is you got to know your athlete, right? So you got to understand. You can't just tell her to push the pace and then die on handstand push-ups. I knew how good she was. I mean, listen, very few people in the world have ever been as good at handstand push-ups as Kari is. You know, I mean, I would argue she's the best of all time and at that movement. So, you know, so telling her to push the pace was with the understanding that, yeah, you're going to be hurting, but then you're going to come back, and by the time you get through 25, 30 handstand push-ups, your heart rate's going to have come down, and now you're in a part of the workout that's a wheelhouse. And if you can build a lead, you know, through the handstand push-ups, you may be able to build a lead that's big enough that no one's going to be able to catch you. And that was really the idea. Is let's blitz the field here on these first couple movements, and then hang on. You know, so
Kari, what's going through your head? Oh, go ahead.
I was like, I do remember being in the run though, and just being like, oh, is this too fast? Like, I'm trying to, you know, maintain a pace with Haley, like being close to her. Like, I don't want to ruin the workout, but, you know, trust in Justin and in my coach that we had the right strategy. And I mean, I knew I was good at handstand push-ups, but still, you don't want to redline too soon and then not be able to recover. But it's like all the training, all the hours that you've put in have prepared you for this. So just trust your fitness.
And I don't think we've shown the event description. Maybe I missed it, but it's. I just looked it up. It's 100. What was it? 100.
It's a 1 mile run.
1 mile run. There was 100 chest to bar, right?
No, 100
handstand push-ups, then 200
pistols
alternating, and then 300 chest to bar pull-ups, right?
Yep. Just regular pull-ups.
Regular pull-ups, and then finish with a mile run on the back end.
And all of it vested, 20 and 14-pound vest.
I'll try to fix that.
Yep. And in this first run, you know, is there anything that you're telling yourself in terms of how, and everybody runs with the vest a little bit differently. I think, you know, one of the aspects around doing Murph is, you know, certain people have their fit for the vest. Did you guys get pre-fitted for this? Was there a certain way that you had to wear it, or were you allowed to maybe like adjust it a little bit for the run?
From what I remember, we were pre-fitted for it, and luckily these vests were a lot smaller than any of the other vests that I have, so they were a little bit different, and I think they designed them differently with it being, they knew we were going to do handstand push-ups, which is a different movement than, you know, people usually do in a weight vest, and I always prefer it to be like a little looser so I can breathe, but I also get annoyed when it's like bouncing up and down and moving too much, so it's trying to find that happy medium of it just being comfortable enough that it's not bouncing and annoying me, but also tight enough that it's not, or not too tight that it's like cutting off my breathing.
Is there any sort of like effect on the setting? I always joked that there's such a juxtaposition between the intensity of the moment and where you actually are, because you're running, here you are, you're trying to make your sporting career dreams come true in this moment, and you're running along this like road in Aromas that literally sits next to Highway 101, and there's cows and horses and like Mexican dudes like like breaking in stallions to your left the entire time.
Right. I feel like you're like running though, and you're so focused on like, okay, Haley's there. And then you like start to see people and you're like, oh yeah, like look at the grass. No, focus. Like it's like a little bit of like being in the zone and just like knowing what you have to do, but like it's a long workout and you kind of just want to let yourself relax mentally for a second, but it's like, no, like I know what I have to do. I am the tiger, like focus. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of like looking around, but also like knowing what was at risk and what was at stake.
Was this your first time at the ranch?
No, I was at the ranch back in 2016 when they flew
Oh, that's
us
right.
out there.
Yep, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, the trail run, the max deadlift, and then there was like a wall ball PhD hill sprint workout. So yeah, ran the hill a couple times.
Was the footing pretty good there? Like I remember that the road kind of takes a beating over the years, and I can't remember if they filled in all the potholes in 2016 versus 2020.
I mean, this run was fine. It was nice being on road and not going up a hill.
Yeah,
a slight hill here, but not the crazy hill that they made you run up with a sandbag.
That hill, you have to see it in person. You just does. I mean, it looks steep when you see it here. Which is for the famous hill run that they did, and then you guys did it again in 2020. But the video does not do that justice of how just aggressive that incline is.
Yeah, especially when you're with other super fit people that are like pushing the pace.
Right.
Was there a goal mile time? I know some people try to hit a range at least, but was there any discussion around that?
Not that I remember. No, it was kind of more based on effort, and I feel like this late in the weekend too, Jess and I talk a lot, and we're kind of like it's just based on feel. Like how you're feeling at this point in the weekend. Like you need to push. But we didn't really like set a time, or I mean, even for like some of the rep schemes, they were like kind of loose because I mean, it really depends on how you're feeling at this point as an athlete after all the other workouts that we had done.
I think actually, if you look at the time, it actually turned out that felt like they ran pretty within themselves. Honestly, it ended up right around 8 minutes, and it looked like Kari had really gone out hot, and then obviously Haley. But the truth of the matter is, with where Kari was with her fitness, that was, So when she came in at that time, I wasn't the least bit worried that she had, if she had gone out and finished, in 7 minutes or low sevens, that would have been that might have been a lot. But really, it was more about positioning. It was position yourself in a good spot. If someone beats you, that's okay. But we got out where we needed to get to be able to utilize. Like now she's in her strength, right? Like now we're wheelhouse, which obviously we're about to see, because I mean she by the end of this, it's she's got a pretty substantial lead.
What was the plan on these, and how did that? So first off, what was the plan? Before I go to the second part,
how the way things have shook up.
Just smash it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have any numbers in mind?
Exact rep scheme, but it was kind of like come out with a big chunk and then chip away. Like you don't want to come anywhere close to failure. Like if you start to feel yourself slow down, get off the wall. And so it was more, like I said, I think it was more based on feel to like get a chunk and then just keep chipping away, short rests like that. I'm a big fan of shorter sets, shorter rests, just like stay on it rather than like a long set and then take a long time to recover. So that was more the game plan, just chip away.
And this is a movement that I really, trusted Kari implicitly. Like it was basically like, you do you on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to trust that by the time we're done with 100, you're going to be, you're going to have caught everyone and most likely have a 20 to 30 rep lead, I would think. And you don't really need me to tell you what your sets will be. You'll feel it. You'll know.
Yeah, and had you done much handstand push-up work with a vest? I know that kind of changes things. You kind of have your baked in, like, hey, I know I can do this under fatigue, or this when I'm fresh, and this is where like my degradation looks like as I get tired. But I imagine a vest has to change that a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely done some with a vest. I think it was more strict than kipping, and I don't think we ever did 100 unbroken in a vest, but at least we had some experience wearing a weight vest, like I said, more strict than kipping. But
When
you know,
you're as good at handstand push-ups as Kari, you have to do things that aren't just regular handstand. So throwing a vest, extreme deficits, just silly things that you can try to think of that, that a lot. Actually, I think that year we'd done a ton of like ring handstand push-ups too, because we thought maybe those would come back. So we had definitely done some work with it, and it's just basically like, okay, you're so good at this. How do we make you better, or how do we, throw some things at you that actually are challenging inverted? And so yes, we were definitely familiar with doing it with a vest. And now you can see, she's starting to stretch. Right? Yeah.
It was it was impressive to see the way you distanced yourself in the back half, because I think you took the lead right around 50 reps and then started to pull away. But also I liked the white boxes for the handstand push-up that made it, with the contrast with the black, made it a very nice clear visual for people as far as like handstand push-up standard using that box, and also made me feel really bad about myself because you're cruising and your hands are like 3 inches inside the box.
I'm using all that real estate I can possibly get. Right.
I mean, I'm hugging the corners on that one.
I do have these like T-Rex arms, so they do come in handy with handstand push-ups too.
Okay, so you're off. You're going on to the one-legged squat. So when you're this far in front, mentally, what does that do to you? Is it okay, just keep pushing, or is it, do you ever second guess like where you are, because you are obviously competing against a bunch of fit people, and like you said with the run, did I go out too hot? But what's the mindset right now at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was the best at handstand push-ups, so that was where I knew I had to attack and just get as much of a lead as possible and just, manage my sets. But your shoulders can get tired. Like, I remember Justin just being like, push the handstand push-ups. Like, yeah, your arms are going to get tired, but you have 200 pistols for them to recover, so you're going to have plenty of time to get that feeling back in your arms, get that recovery. And I feel like during it, I was just like kind of cruising. I'm like, oh, you can slow down. Like, nobody's with you. It's fine. Yeah. But then I would see Justin, or I would hear Justin. It's like, okay, no, you got to keep going. And you know that the athletes, they're chipping away and they're going to be coming after you shortly after. So it was just pedal to the metal until like mentally I let up for a little bit, and then I'm like, no, like stay focused, like you got to push it now, like no regrets.
And obviously with fewer athletes, it's a more intimate setting. You can tap into Justin kind of motivating you along the way, but it also seemed like it was easier to track your competition. Like, you're not staring down a field of 10 athletes or 20 athletes or the full field if it's something like we do at the North Park at the games. Were you able to sense that in this moment? Because it seems, you hop right under the pistols, and it seemed like you're like, all right, I'm comfortable here, and I can track who's chasing.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely look and see where everybody was, and so that's when I was kind of like, okay, just like chip away at these pistols, see how much you can either continue to gain on them or keep the lead on them. It's one of those, like, you're not there to just win, like, you're there to smash it and do your best and not look back and question if I could have went faster on those pistols, would I have won? Like, that would have put me on the podium. And so I think a lot of the time for me, it was just kind of refocusing and knowing what my goal was. And if I would start to let up mentally, then it's like, no, refocus. You know what you have to do. Like, look down. Okay, stay ahead of them. You're a block ahead of them. Stay a block ahead of them. Just, it's going to hurt. It's going to burn. But this is what you've trained so hard for.
And you've been through a bunch of mental grind events before in your career leading up to this. You mentioned Mary, you mentioned Murph. How did this compare to those?
I would do Mary 100 times before I do this workout again. I mean, it was fun while I was going through it. I do wish there was more handstand push-ups like while I was going. But it really was a grind. It hurt so bad. But I feel like that's why you're doing it with all the other athletes, because you know that they're so mentally tough. So just being able to step up in that kind of situation, I think, is just a testament to myself, my mental and physical strength.
Yeah. So what are the things that maybe you do during an event that's this long and this much of a grind to avoid losing focus?
I mean, like I've said, partly, like I definitely could hear Justin as I was going through it. And it is one of those events too that I knew I had to win it. And I knew, like, you know, we had to have somebody between me and Haley. I actually wasn't even sure if there was one person or two people or how that looked. But in order to just finish the way that I wanted, it was basically win the event. And 2019, I had went out too hot on one event with the toes rings and fell off, and that kind of ruined my chances at the podium. And this event, I knew the podium was within grasp, and I knew what I had to do. So it's just, you know, one rep at a time. You have 200 reps in front of you, and just one, two, and like you're looking at the box, and you're like, okay, just make it through this box, and then move on to the next. Then focus on that box. Move on to the next.
Does the short sets help you from, I just call it workout ADD? Like sometimes if you're thinking about a large set, it's easy to kind of get lost in it. Like I know people that try to rip off big chunks in Murph and they lose count, you know, and it's almost like you find your mind wandering when you have to count to 20 or 30 or even 15 or 10. And it seems like, I don't know if you have the same experience, but you know, if I'm doing sets at 2, 5, whatever it is, it's really easy to stay focused on that one because the turnover is so quick.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if there's ever like 50 burpee box jump overs in a workout, then I'm like, okay, 10 done. You have one set of 5 sets done. And so it's just, an easy way to like stay focused and like break it down. And first thing I remember when I started CrossFit back in 2015, I competed at the Granite Games. And one of the events was a 1K row into a 10K row. And I did fine in the 1K, not so good in the 10K. Granted, I'm not tall, but I remember my endurance coach is basically saying like, you mentally suck at longer workouts. And so that was something that really opened my eyes, and it made me figure out how to fix it. And that was focus on smaller things, like smaller sets, or like every 500 meters in that row, like go for this time. So like this event, okay, just focus on these 50 reps you have right in front of you, and then you can focus on the next 50 when you get there.
Justin, how do you manage that with an athlete, whether it's Kari or anybody else who obviously has the physical gifts, but maybe there is a mental component that needs to be adjusted? What are the things that you can do to help improve that?
Well, I think a lot of it is you have to, first of all, you got to identify weaknesses. You got to identify what people's strengths and weaknesses are. And then it's about a couple things. One, it's putting them in those positions and training over and over and over and over again to the point where they no longer fear those things, right? And ultimately with Kari, you know, I mean, she'll tell you, you know, we did workouts that year that, you know, I don't want to admit it, but there were workouts that, you know, brought her to tears. That were workouts that when they were over with, we would talk about them, and you know, it wasn't tears of
right.
It was close to breaking her essentially. But once she got through them, it proved to her like, hey, I can do incredibly hard things, and I can do them. And one of the things that, you know, I always talked about with her, and I talk about with a lot of my athletes, but it's one of my favorite sayings. And it's kind of simple, but the workout's going to end. Like this is not going to go on forever. You're not going to have to worry about it, right? It's not like I always talk about like Greek mythology, Sisyphus, who pushes the rock up and then it comes right back down. You got to just do that perpetually. This is not that. Like when you get to the top, you're done. Like it's over. And as bad as it's going to be, it's going to end. So at the end of the day, you got to do it anyway. You got to finish it. You know, you can't quit. You got to do it. And we had done workouts that were so incredibly hard leading up to this. And, you know, I think for her, it was really important because it was like, hey, I know I can do really hard things, and I can do really hard things for a long time, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. You know, I can do it with movements that I freaking hate, you know. I mean, there were workouts I would literally put, you know, weakness. There was nothing there to be like, oh, great, I can hang my head. You know, and so when we did that, you know, and now you're talking about a workout that obviously is brutal, but guess what? There are some movements in there that she actually likes, you know. So if you can look at that and be like, you know what, like I've done stuff harder than this for longer than this, and when you can do that you know, and when you can prove that to an athlete and they understand that, they also start to trust themselves more, you know, and that's really important as a breakthrough for an athlete is that they have that belief in themselves that they can do hard things. And I'll tell you what, that is not an easy trait to have. You know, that's not something that's easy to learn. You know, some athletes have it more than others, and Kari obviously is as tough as they come. But I still think that there were things that we needed to do that year to make her feel like, you know what, I can take myself to another level of doing hard things. And, you know, I mean, I feel like it paid off.
At this point, Kari, you mentioned that you needed someone between you and Haley. And Haley's got a 10 rep lead on Catherine. I'm guessing, were you at all paying attention to that, or is it just like, I just got to do these 300 pull-ups?
It was, I just got to do these 300 pull-ups. Like, I could see that Haley was down kind of next to me. I didn't know exactly where she was in comparison to any of the other athletes. I think I was just really focused on myself. And I'm usually an athlete that is aware of where other people are at, what they are doing. But I think the special circumstances of this workout, just knowing, I mean, like 300, anything can change in 300 pull-ups and then still another mile run. Like, this workout is far from over. So it really was just staying focused on me and what I knew I had to do, and not trying to see where other people are at or be better than somebody else. It's like, okay, what can you do? Stay focused in the moment.
I don't think we didn't have floor announcers either, did we?
I wasn't there, so
I don't remember. I don't think they did.
There was, I think this was one of the big, like, shit moments, because every now and then with, like, you know, there's moments where, like, the capacity of the game's athletes just kind of like leaves your jaw on the floor. When you were walking to the pull-up bar and everyone, there was like the realization that, like, she just did 200 weighted pistols, 100 handstand push-ups, and ran a mile, and we're just barely hitting the 21-minute mark. And everybody's kind of doing the mental math in your head. You're like, oh my God, I think I'd still be on the handstand push-ups. Like, that's insane.
Well, the messaging was, when they told us about this, it's like, you guys have to say this on the broadcast. Like, this is not for everyday gym consumption. Like, this is weapons grade CrossFit. That we're putting these athletes through. Like, and they made sure that we were trying to hidden that throughout the broadcast, that this is not what you're going to see typically programmed at your affiliate, but we can put these athletes through that because they are the best in the world and they have just incredible capacity.
And I think, like, I don't know if you program this with a 40 or even a 20 athlete field at this point, right? You know, because you look at the volume throughout the weekend. You've done at least 10 tests up to this point. You've done the ranch loop, you know, forwards and backwards. You've done all this other work. And you know definitively these are the top 5 in the world, so that you don't have to worry about what's going to happen to athletes 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 with this type of volume, which, you know, again, like you mentioned, added to that narrative of how good it was. I also think there's something poetic that, you know, you mentioned Sisyphus, you know, as a Greek mythology, and then the workout that's, you know, effectively setting up for the podium moment is another Greek mythos character in Atalanta, which is pretty cool, especially for Kari, also because she was this famous Greek mythology person that was a female and known for her hunting skills as well. It all just kind of like aligned, you know, in retrospect.
Yeah, definitely hunting everybody down.
This is right where I think Catherine tied or pulled even with Haley.
And Catherine was moving real fast.
Too fast. Too fast for comfort. You know, I think I was getting a little nervous at this point because Kari is very good at pull-ups, but Kari's grip strength was not fantastic, and a lot of that she had to do is just really small hands. And I could see when she had to start going down to fours, she's not there yet, but when she had to start going down to fours, and Catherine was knocking out 5s, and every time they would jump up, Catherine would knock out 5, Kari knock out 4, Catherine knock out 5, Kari knock out 4, and you just started seeing the reps, and I was starting to lose it a little bit.
And let's talk about it a little bit, because one of my favorite things sometimes, and this is selfish, is watching you watch your athletes,
100%.
because it's I feel like it's like, you know, I don't know, episode of Seinfeld and Kramer watching the horse race at the track, like just slapping his leg and getting fired up, and you can see the blood pressure going. But I mean, it seems like it would be worse, right? Because you can see the slow increment, right? It's spread out over a time instead of hitting instantly. You can see the slow creep, starting 50 reps back, then 40 reps, then 30 reps, and I think she gets off at like 10 or 11 reps behind, and you're like, try not to, you know, have your ticker kick out on the floor.
Yeah, there was, to me, it was like this workout really, you know, that back half of the pull-ups was where this thing started to get really interesting. And, you know, obviously then you had me yelling at Kari, and you had Ben yelling at Katrin, and, you know, he was driving me nuts with the sled dog thing. You know, was, come on, sled dog. You know, I was like losing my shit. And then finally I was just like, you know, there was really nothing more I could scream. So at that point, then I yell at Kari, like, just listen to Ben. He's so annoying. It should be enough to like fuel you at this point. Like the sled dog thing, if that doesn't piss you off enough to stay in front of her, I don't know what will. Like, so I just kept saying, listen to Ben. Like, let him fuel you with this sled dog shit. Like, I was driving me nuts. So
that's another like random like thing you're not used to as much, right? Because you're all there, so you can hear the other coach. And normally, like, I don't know, this kind of stuff is like it's pretty normalized in other sports. But I feel like we got a little dose of it here with like, all right, this coach is starting to get to me. It's like you get that dynamic.
It was really, it was like funny because I remember how I felt, and I was just like, oh my God, this is getting to a point where I'm about to lose my shit.
It's funny how a competitive setting will take two people who I'm sure you and Ben are fine. You know,
we get along.
But when you put your two competitive guys in that setting and you just start, the chirping starts, it's like, I hate you now.
Oh man.
And you could see it, man. She just started to, you know, it was 50, and now we're at 40. And
it's such a big chunk. I mean, 300 pull-ups as a volume with the vest was. It's easy to get caught up on the skill component of the handstand push-ups and the pistols, but then just the sheer pulling volume. I don't know if you've ever done something like that remotely, like close. I don't know if it's reasonable to do that outside of maybe Mary, where you have it spread out across, you know, 20 rounds, but even still throwing the vest and doing it on partition just was
no chance. We had not come close to doing 300 pull-ups unbroken. Let alone with a vest.
This is one of those things, and we've had these throughout the games where something gets introduced. I remember like legless rope climbs. Like, oh man, that's incredible. How are we ever going to do this? And now it just is a thing, right? You just do it. I don't know if like 300 pull-ups consecutively is ever just going to be, that's just what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it cool. And maybe Kari, you can speak to this too. Is like because of the unique scenario, you got to do something that people might not be able to get to say they do again for a long time. You know, you might be able to say like, hey, I got to do that crucible or that test, and you know, I won it. So that it's almost like I don't know, a once in a blue moon type thing that not everyone else is going to get to experience.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I don't think I would ever do it voluntarily. Some of like marathon row that we had to do, like, but you're doing it against the fittest, so it really just pushes you harder than you would push yourself. And at that point, you don't have an option. Like, it's not like, no, I'm not going to do those 300 pull-ups. Like, you have to. And so just going out there and like Justin said, starting with 5s and then just feeling myself kind of peel away and being able to do like 4s, but just staying on it. And I feel like with anything, 300, when you look at it, is a lot, but once again, just kind of like breaking it down. So it's like 100 on a bar, 100 on a bar, then 50, then 50. And so at least you could break it down that way. And so I was trying not to tell myself like, this is 300 pull-ups. This is a lot, especially as I could see Katrin kind of get a little closer to me. But yeah, 300 pull-ups, especially in a vest. My biceps only trained a lot of pulling, so my biceps were a little sore the next day, but luckily my hands didn't rip or anything, which,
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I feel very fortunate for. I had like a little blood blister, but I wore like the tactical victory grips, and they're the same ones that I wore for Mary. So I would say they protected my hands very well, because I saw the other girls, some of them, their hands were just shredded.
Yeah. That's an interesting point too, because I think everyone maybe had some physical cues internally around when stuff starts to go downhill. You know, I think Bill talked about it at one point. The drop down from the pull up, you can start to feel it clunk a little bit, like your ability to maintain the cycle. Was there any of that for you? Was there like, hey, this is when I need to switch, or these are my cues when I know that my pull up endurance is starting to go?
Yeah, I mean, I was really focused on using my hips as much as I could. And then, like you said, almost like letting go of the bar a little sooner than I normally would for pull-ups, just to like save that like quarter second of grip strength. Because I knew, like Justin said, my grip strength would be the first to go, probably, I mean, at the same time kind of as my pulling. So just really using my hips and then just letting go a split second sooner to save that little bit of grip strength that, you know, is obviously crucial when you're doing 300 reps.
And earlier, and I meant to ask this earlier, but we saw Matt and Tia put hats on with ice in it. Heat management, sun management is always a consideration when you get into these longer events. Is there something that you do in particular that helps? Are you not a hat person? Some people aren't, you know, and some people have different things that they do. Was it an issue for you here at all?
Yeah, so I'm not a hat person, so I don't like anything that I think might get in my way during a workout. Like if I had a hat, I'm like, it might fall off, it might get in my face. Like even my hair, I'm like, just try and get it back out of the way. I had water, like some waters with me along the way. I tried to set those up or like make it quick if I would grab some or like drinking it, or I remember like pouring some on me. And then also there was like, you can see a touch of shade. And I remember, especially in the first set of pull-ups, like just going over and trying to like stand in the shade, going out, and so getting a little bit of shade as much as I could. But then I think the water was huge too, to just try and stay cool, because everyone's wearing t-shirts. Well, at least I wore a t-shirt and like the longer pants, because I knew it was going to be a run, and I knew I didn't want to get scraped at all from the vest. I'm like, it's a little more coverage. Then I would like keeping the body heat in, but at the end of the day, like that's going to be my best outfit for the workout. So I decided to go with that and not shorts or a tank top.
For sure. Was there any dust management? You don't really get it anywhere else, but the ranch can get really dusty depending on where you are working. I don't know. Since I wasn't there on site, I don't know if they had done a good job of like kind of dampening down the soil at all. But was that anything to deal with?
Luckily, I didn't really notice too much. I know there was a few times that I felt something like blow in my eye, so I'm like trying to get it out of my eye. I wear contacts too, so I feel like sometimes if dust gets in my eye, then it just gets in there and it doesn't want to come out. So there was like a little bit of that, but I mean, I feel like I was trying to get chalk everywhere, so I wouldn't have known the difference if it was chalk or dust at that moment.
Jeez, we still have 100 left.
That's what's crazy.
I'm like, my God.
I'm watching it right now. I didn't realize Katrin had cut the lead that fast. I mean, through 200, she was now only 15 reps behind. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And
Go
go
I
ahead.
wonder what her sets were too. I don't know.
I think she had just stayed with like 6s and 5s.
That was 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even if it's like one more rep a set, that definitely adds up a lot.
Yeah, she held 5s, I think, through the 200 mark, and then it kind of just became like free for all. Like, what can you hold on through? What's the
And how
adjustment? in the
quickly you
moment?
can get back up too.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and I remember especially when she like came over to that final bar with me. Then I was like, oh man, this just got real. It was like I didn't really know like how much she was catching up. I could hear Justin, like I knew that she was catching up, but I didn't know what rep she was on, how close she was. I knew obviously how many reps we had left, but how close of a battle it was, I really didn't have an idea until she like came to that final bar, and I was like, oh, this might end up coming down to a sprint to the finish. Like it might end up being like the run is what's going to matter.
We had this conversation with Josh Bridges and Murph in one of our earlier episodes, is that one of the benefits, if you are able to tap into it in the moment, of the longer events is a little bit of a presence of awareness. So like if for him in the lead, being in the lead in that one, he can actually enjoy that more and use it as a motivation, because it's not like split second, like all out sprint, right? There's a moment on the run for you to like take stock and then tap into that. Did you have that at all where you're like, hey, I'm competing for my podium and I'm in a pretty cool spot right now, or at least like tap into that at all?
Yeah, I think throughout the workout, especially after the handstand push-ups, when you're like doing the pistols by yourself, you're like, I just smashed those. Like that was pretty fun. And like I said, in the back of my mind, I almost wanted more of those just to get a little more of a lead, and I just love being upside down. But then, yeah, just being able to enjoy the pistols, but still, you got to stay in the moment and stay focused. I think on the pull-ups, especially when I found out like Katrin was this close, it was kind of like, okay, like you got to keep doing what you can. But I feel like for me at this point, it was a lot more muscular than it was cardio. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, like even if she gets off the pull-up bar first, like you have more in the tank to beat her on the run. And so I think, I don't know, in my mind, it was kind of just like going back and forth, like taking inventory of where I was, but then also still just thinking about like the end goal, which is winning the event. So I don't know if I necessarily like thought about enjoying it on the pull-ups. It's kind of just like, okay, keep chipping away, try and stay ahead of Katrin, or at least like within her, and then know like what the rest of the workout is going to be like, and keep that in the back of your mind, like as she's approaching you, and maybe like the negative, the self-doubt, like that kind of creeps in, like no, like you're so fit, like just get through these as fast as you can, because like I couldn't have gone any faster, but then know what is at stake for the next movement and final movement of the workout.
Would a crowd have made any difference here? Because this entire weekend that you were competing, there were no fans. I mean, there were some that showed up that were like on the outside of the fence. But what difference would that have made, if any?
I feel like the crowd, they definitely give you more energy, and during a workout, like make you want to jump up and go faster. But in a workout like this, I really don't think there was like much else I could have done. I couldn't have really gone faster. I mean, maybe like the final run, I would have been able to push more, but the first run, you just got to be smart on. And then, I mean, the handstand push-ups and the pistols, I couldn't have gone any faster. It probably would have made it more fun, just like hearing everybody. But then I also wouldn't have been able to hear Justin and then Ben as loud and clearly as I did, which I feel like is one of the things that I just really remember about this workout and making it so special, because you never get that interaction with your coach while you're doing a workout, because they're always like in the stand so far from you. So just having him right there, I think was almost more motivation than any number of fans or anything could have been for me personally.
Well, at least we got
at least the non-skippable ad has dogs in it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's motivation, seeing the dogs.
Yeah. Oh man. And it's even hearing you say like, hey, I've got more gas in the tank for the run, just like thinking about like compare this to Murph, right? I think everybody's like worst feeling is having to get into a foot race on the last mile of Murph, because at that point you're like barely walking off the last air squats. But even just thinking about here, like having to finish like an all-out mile with like the podium on the line, like that's like, for lack of a better term, that's epic shit right there.
Thank you. I mean, I didn't say that I wanted to do it. I said,
that's true. That's true. But what was that like for you at some point, having to not only tap into Justin's voice but Ben too? Because it's funny, you have those experiences growing up. You pick out like the pitch and tone of your coach, your parent, whatever it is, and you can almost like hear them through a crowd. But then having to like maybe make that adjustment, listen to someone else, I imagine that can be a little different.
Yeah, it was a little different, but honestly, like those are the two main voices I heard, and I think probably part of it is because I was like hearing Justin, and then I heard him say Ben, and then I could just hear like sled dog, and I was just like, oh, I want to beat this sled dog. So I definitely like tuned in to Justin, but then heard that, and those were really like the two voices that just stuck out to me during this workout.
Are you typically more motivated through like I want to say positive or negative reinforcement, whether that be like not necessarily negative reinforcement in that like you personally, but seeing the adversarial position of like hearing someone else cheering someone else on?
Yeah, I definitely think that helps motivate me when I hear somebody cheer somebody else on. But one of the lines Justin would always say that I feel like just like hit home is be tougher than everybody else. Like you are
There you
tougher
go.
than everybody else. And that just like always motivated me. So I feel like that almost like the negative reinforcement. But it
Yeah.
also is positive. So I don't know. That line just always fired me up. Oh, there's the dust you were talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and isn't that the vehicle? No, is it? No, it's not.
Oh,
I thought-
yeah, I think
It
it's
was.
it's the vehicle tracking.
Yeah, it's the
that-
cart.
Yep.
She's got
I don't
got
know.
that-
No, it wouldn't have been because it would. Yeah, because that's been a problem before. That cart has been out front, started kicking up
Yeah.
dirt, and they had to. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a cart here. I
There
was
goes
tracking.
Catherine.
Tia Toomey and Haley Adams, meanwhile,
And
are
yeah, that dust cloud came right as you were like full breath.
Yeah.
You get a little gasoline and hill dust.
Right, got some lungs full of sand and you look great.
Justin, I think it was either. I think when she took off on the run.
I was screaming my head off.
Yeah,
could
and
hear
I
it and stuff,
remember
yeah.
that was one of the first times like, who is this guy and how do I get him to scream at me like that? Because that's motivating as hell. Like, what did you say to her?
I said, everything you want is right in front of you. I remember saying that, and I just kept screaming at her. And then I ran down the hill, and I was at this fence here screaming my head off at her. And I just, Katrin historically is a really good runner. I didn't want it to have to come down to a race in the last 800 meters, so I wanted her to try to break her down the hill, because when she ran down the hill, by the time she could sprint those first 400 meters and get far enough ahead. Sometimes as an athlete behind you, you're just like, you know what, I can't catch this person. So I'm just going to hold my position as opposed to try to catch the person in front of me. And I wanted her to get out fast. I didn't really, I felt like that was the time for us to win the workout, was right when she got off the pull-up bar. And I think it ended up working pretty well.
It's so funny you mentioned it. That was one of the few times we could hear you on the stream.
Yeah.
There was a turn, and it was like, I don't know where the audio source was coming from, but as it transitioned out, we could hear the scream on and it was like, oh,
Got me fired up.
yeah, absolutely. This is so this run here it's a little bit uphill on the way out, and it's just slightly downhill on the way back. I know you checked in at one point when you turned the corner. It's really hard to check and catch your bearings on this straightaway because it's relatively straight. Was there a checkpoint here for you where, okay, I guess you checked right there too, where you're like, okay, maybe I'm in the position I need to be.
Yeah, I think I would like run a little bit and then I would turn to see where Katrin was or if I could see her, kind of run and see if I could see her. And I think just in my mind, it's like, okay, you have this, but you still can't let up because Katrin is a really good runner. And the last thing you want is to push that hard through the workout and then have a regret right here of slowing down or even like the little thoughts of walking. It's like, no, like you have to keep running, like run hard until you get to the 800. Then you turn around, you can kind of gauge where you're at. And I feel like you get there though, and you're like, well, I can't let up now. So just kind of seeing where she was at. And then I remember once I did turn around and then I went down a little bit and I ended up seeing her and I could tell that she wasn't running as fast as like I thought maybe she was. And I was like, okay, you got this, but you still can't let up. Like, you got to push.
Do you get a boost from that? I know there's kind of like that realization moment where you're like, hey, like my opponents, I liken it back to fighting. You can see your opponent's posture break, whether it's, jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, whatever. And you're like, all right, I got this. And it almost gives you that extra boost to stomp the gas. Did you feel that in that moment when you saw her?
Yeah, I definitely did. And I feel like then my heart like started smiling. My face was too tired to smile. But I think my heart started smiling because it's like, this is yours. And then also, you have some time to think. And I'm like, okay, well, if Katrin finishes after me. And then I remember seeing like Tia as I was running too. And I was like, okay, like I'm ahead of both of them. And they're like in between Haley. So I'm like, this is setting up well. So it's just like extra motivation to then just keep pushing and just being like, wow, you are really fit. And everyone thinks like you're not a good runner, but this is just proving like to yourself and everybody else, like you've worked so much on this that it's going to pay off when you win this event.
At what point do you start thinking, I can't wait to do X, Y, and Z as soon as I cross this finish line?
As I was like running up that final hill, that brings you back in. I just remember like running and then like wanting to, and it's like, no, like you can rest when you're done. Like you can rest as long as you want when you're done. You can't let up now. Like what if Katrin ended up like having a final push and then caught you? Like no regrets, just you got to keep going. And so during that time, it was like, okay, I can rest, but am I gonna? No, focus. Like you need to cross the finish line first.
The last
that hill that's like right there was like gnarly when you're tired and you're like going up it, and it feels like it's like 45-degree incline, even though it's probably like 10 or 15 degrees. But at the end of the workout, it's gnarly.
And so at this point, 3 previous seasons, 2019 as well, you'd finished as the fittest woman in America. You know, more than anyone else, but also at the same time, it was almost like lacking that one little thing on top, and that's like the podium finish. And you mentioned 2019, you would come up close. You know, a slip up on the rings. A few other times, like 2016, you had some really tremendous performances, but stuff that just kind of kept you off. What was different about this year to put you in this moment that you felt like this is finally going to happen?
Yeah, well, I started working with Justin in 2018 after that season. So we had been together through 2019 and then obviously the full year of 2020. So when I met with Justin, I basically told him, I was like, my goal is to get on the podium. At that point, I finished, 5th and 6th. I was top American twice. And basically I was like, are you willing to work with me so that we can make that goal happen? And at the time, he was like, I am busy. I have a lot going on. But he ended up taking me on as an athlete because he's like, that would just be incredible. So we had one season together. And I feel like even that year, like he said, it was right there. It was like one slip up on the rings. And just knowing that basically one mistake kind of kept me from it. It was like, this is my year. Like, we've done everything we can, especially leading to stage 2, like so much running. I've never done so much running before in my life, but he knew it was going to be at the ranch. There was going to be a lot of running. Like this is going to prepare you to be as fit as you ever have been before. And so I think the longer time working with Justin, the more running and, him pushing me to my wit's end and knowing that whatever workout I do at the games is never going to be as tough as some of the workouts he put me through in training had just prepared me for the whole weekend, but especially this workout in this moment.
And what's the finish line feeling for you? Everyone's a little bit different, but you turn this corner here and then the finish line kind of comes into view. And it's not just the finish line, it's Justin, your coach who's been helping you get to this moment. It's 47 plus minutes of effort behind you, and it's almost like there's your podium waiting for you in the distance. What's going through your head, your heart, your emotions? Describe that to us.
Well, right now I have tears because I feel like every time I do it, it always happens. Maybe one day it won't, but it is like as you see the finish line, like I even start to like smile here because I can just see Justin like after the finish line and knowing like you made it through that workout. Sorry. You made it through the workout. You pushed yourself to your limit. Like, I mean, there's nothing else I could have done in that workout. Took the top spot, looked back, like, yeah, Katrin wasn't even there. I was like, we dominated that workout. And, obviously hot and tired at the end, but I feel like you can't even put that moment into words. Like, you see the finish line, you smile, you know what you just did, and then I like that workout. But I don't know. It's just, I feel like the tears kind of just like speak for themselves. The years of wanting to be on the podium. And it's like, okay, well, I did what I could. I put it all out there. We'll see what happens and how the points shake out. But there was no doubt left in my mind, and I couldn't have been happier with my performance and being right there with Justin.
What were you thinking when you saw Katrin come around, knowing that you were going to get that person between you and Haley?
I mean, I was ecstatic when I saw her. But in my mind, I actually still wasn't quite sure if it was one person or two people that I needed. And so I like saw her finish though, and I was like, okay, like this is good. And I was like, does that mean me and Haley tie or did I beat her? I still like wasn't quite sure, but I was like, okay, well, I still beat her by a lot longer than I thought I would when we were in the pull-up race. So I was like, yeah, you're a pretty good runner, huh? So that was kind of like a pat on my back and Justin's back from all the running we had done that year to pay off in this workout.
And Justin's what's going through your mind at this point too? Are you still doing calculations? Are you double checking? Are you spending time with her?
I knew. Yeah, I knew. We weren't. They hadn't given us the okay yet to cross, like to cross that fence or whatever it was that was there, the barrier. So I wasn't able to get to her yet. But I think it's coming soon. And I knew that she had done it. Yeah, it was so cool. It was almost like this monkey, off our back. I felt like we had this goal, and you create this goal that you want to achieve. And Kari was already so good, but to be able to go from fifth to the podium, people know. I mean, there's a lot of people who finished fifth that have never gotten to the podium. You know what I mean? It's just this next level of greatness. And for her to be able to achieve it, I was just ecstatic. I mean, she's just such a good person, and I love her. Sorry.
Love you, Coach.
Yeah, it couldn't have happened to a nicer person, and I was just happy to be a small part of it, to be honest with you. And it was really cool to be there. It was a incredible experience, one that I'll always remember. And it's fun to reminisce on it.
Justin, one thing that I think I admire about you, and I like the way about your styles, and I feel like your athletes are more than your athletes. It's almost like they're your kids, for lack of a better term. And I love that, and I think that's where like the evocative nature of your reactions come from. It's because like you're reacting to if your own child had done that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. I think honestly, it's hard on me because it takes a lot out of me. Mm-hmm. I think that's why, it's just I go to things like this and then I crash for 2 weeks afterwards because I'm so emotionally spent. But yeah, it's not a business relationship for me. It's this incredibly emotional experience that I feel with these athletes, and it's very special, man. It really is super special.
And this is something that has started to come into the view for me as my wife and I look towards potentially having kids at some point. But the coaching relationship, when you have those ties, there's an element of sacrifice, right? Because you don't ultimately get to take the field, right? You put this input and then you have to almost surrender the outcome in a sense, because you have to let what is going to happen, right? And you don't get to physically step on the field. And I don't know how do you manage that? I mean, it's Kari's capable, right? And that moment is there for her. And then you have to sit back and just watch.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I could barely watch my brother run a middle school track race, and I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think CrossFit is hard too because so much of it is the preparatory phase. Where in other sports as a coach, like the in game is so important, right? Like the game day coach. You talk about I think that's what separates some of the best coaches in the NFL or the NBA is the decisions that they make in game. And I think it's one of the disadvantages of a CrossFit coach is you don't have that luxury. You're not able to make those split decisions or affect the performance while they're on the competition floor. Yeah. But felt like that weekend was a little bit different. I felt like that weekend we were able to affect things a little bit more. And I felt like, even just being able to have, whether it was 5% or 10%, more effect on things, maybe that was the difference. Maybe that was enough, and I don't know that. Obviously, I mean, listen, Kari put in all the work and she's ultimately the one that did what she did. But I just tried to be the best that I could be for her.
Yeah.
And I tried to be the best that I could be that season. I tried to be the best that I could be every time we were together. And I tried to be the best that I could be, each competition. And, stage 1, we were right there, able to affect it. And stage 2, more than we've ever been, and we've never had access like that.
Yeah.
So to be able to be there and have access and feel like I was able to help just squeeze out that little bit extra to get her on the podium is, as a coach, it's a cool feeling, man.
Awesome. Well,
I will say this, and this is my last comment on the matter. I remember visiting you guys out in Vegas before stage 2. Mars, Heber, and myself came out, and they were doing a little bit of a vlog just to see how preparation. And I almost remember that being the lead up into 2020, stage 2 being almost like the genesis of what Underdogs is today.
Yeah.
In that, like, things were starting to, kind of form a little bit in Vegas. You're building an athlete roster, and then you have this moment where it's such a distilled athlete field, and Kari ultimately makes that jump onto the podium, and it was like, oh, okay, this is the anchor point. This is like that big moment. And I don't know if you felt that, or if it was just one of those things you can reflect on now when you look back.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it's interesting. I had been doing this a long time, even before that. Like I had coached my first games athlete in 2010, but I think I had done it a lot in obscurity, and I think I hadn't, coached a ton of athletes and but we had this really cool gym in New York called Dynamics, and Dynamics had done really well, obviously, on the team side of things. And obviously I had been very successful in the National Pro Grid League, winning a few championships with the Brawlers. And
that's what I knew you from, actually.
Yeah. But I think that this was kind of a little bit of the coming out party, right, for CrossFit. And, and I don't know that that was ever anything that I really needed or wanted per se. I just wanted to help Kari achieve her goals, and more so because I just love her, Jeez. More so because it's what she wanted, it was her goal, and she had come to me and she had said, I want you, like, I feel like I've hit this plateau, and I feel like I've done what I can do. And I want you to help get me to the next level. And man, it feels fucking good to be able to it does. It just feels good to be able to be like, listen, what we did together, we were able to achieve this goal together, and it's, it was really amazing. But she, she deserves all the accolades. I mean, listen, I've never known anyone who has gotten more out of her talent and her toughness. And, she's just an amazing person. And I think she's done that in everything she's ever done in her life. And she's an incredible role model to, my kids, and especially my daughter, who's a gymnast, and, to all of our young athletes. And obviously now, I look at Alex Kazan, and she really is a very, very close, like a spitting image of Kari, in the sense of someone who is just genuinely an incredible person, who also just happens to be a fucking stud. And so it's fun. I feel blessed to be a coach, to have been able to, come across athletes like this. I'm just very lucky.
Well, that was by far our most emotional episode yet.
Oh,
so
by far.
Good stuff.
I love it.
Thank you both for taking the time to do that and taking a little trip down memory lane. And I know we'll be talking to you soon. And Kari, best of luck moving forward. Miss seeing you out in the competition floor, but I know
Me too.
you are you're having a great time now, and I know there's many good things ahead of you as well. But it was always a pleasure to watch you compete. So thank you for providing those moments for us.
Of course. Thanks so much.